Good morning, everybody here in the room and online, and good afternoon and good evening. We know we have many of you with us online for this super exciting event. So my name is Anna, and together with Nina, we are the founders of the Nordic Business Ethics Initiative, and we are very excited to host discussion here in Helsinki. So we're really thankful for DLA Piper, who we are in their beautiful offices here in Helsinki, and a lot of people on site. So thank you for yet again having us here. And today we have a very exciting theme, as I said. Our headline for today is Advancing Sustainability in the Midst of Regulatory and Political Uncertainty. And when we decided upon this theme, I do not think, Nina, that we thought it would be this crazy as it is right now. And we do hope that we can keep this as an interactive seminar with you here in the room and with everybody of you, the hundreds of you who have joined us online. This is not primarily a seminar to talk about, well, what did the omnibus mean in practice? And what are all of these executive orders in the US? We will touch upon that for sure, but there are a lot of seminars going into details of these, and there's still a lot of uncertainty. So our focus here today is really to join as a community to talk about how do we relate to this uncertainty? What does it mean for us in the ethics and compliance, in the sustainability, in the legal professions? How do we navigate this? How do we interact with our management teams, with our boards, to make sure we stay on course? Because that is really our key message and theme here. We should join together and make sure that we are not rocked. There are a lot of things that happen and will continue to happen. So with that, Nina, I'll hand over to you to guide us a little bit more specifically into who's here and take it from there. So thank you.
Thank you, Anna, and a very good morning also from my side. I think the amount of people here in the room shows that this is a time where we need the support from the peers. And even though we're not going to have all the specific answers to our questions, it will maybe ease some pain that we'll have someone to share these interesting times with. So I can promise for sure that we're going to have a very interesting conversation. And today here, sitting next to me, we have Salla Tuominen from DLA Piper, who is the head of the corporate at DLA. And Salla is really a true expert on corporate governance and compliance and experienced in advising clients with various ESG topics such as human rights and business. And then we have Pontus Sedelman, who is, I think, familiar face for many working with ethics and compliance. You've had a very long career with Stora Enso, having 10 years leading the ethics and compliance program. But then we just heard that you are leaving the compliance field with your new title as the SVP Legal in the Forest Division. And in top of this, you are leading the implementation of the CSDD. So welcome, Pontus and Salla. And thank you, Salla, for hosting us. So I think I will give the floor, Salla, first to you. So exactly 1 year ago, we were here in this very same place, having I think the atmosphere was more or less the same as today. Here we were following the exciting show around the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive with Heidi Hautala. And I guess we couldn't have even imagined back then that where we would be now after 1 year. So a lot of has happened. And I guess this omnibus package is the kind of a key buzzword in everyone's lips, which obviously reduces some burdens for companies who are under the CSRD, and also touch upon the CSDDD. And then, in addition, we have all these developments in the US with the DEI initiatives. So going back through 1 year and where we are today, so how would you, Salla, reflect the whole thing?
Thank you, and also on my behalf, welcome to DLA Piper. Yes, very interesting actually that we sit here today after 1 year, more or less in the same, little bit confused atmosphere. What it happened? Everything ran quite smoothly after the first shocks regarding the kind of the watering down of the CSDDD last spring took place. It was quite of a heavy negotiations. It was interesting to see. I remember Heidi Hautala used the word horse trading in the last minute. I guess it's not too rare in the EU politics as such, but there was a lot of confusion then. But it ended up to then got implemented or got approved through certain sideways, and then I believe all of the countries of member states are now more or less started to work to implement CSDDD. And at least, of course, there are still different opinions. What will happen and how should it be implemented? But as such, not yet too much information either available because the work is ongoing. Well, everything went smoothly, I believe. I guess one kind of a wake-up call for all of this, what we are facing here today, was Mario Draghi's report in September last year, which was some sort of a wake-up call that is EU in the wrong or right direction? What comes to the competitiveness and of EU? Word over regulation was started to use much more than earlier, and that was some sort of a kick-off what we are actually discussing here today. Then since November, the omnibus regulation has been in preparation, and now of course then it came out last week. And there is a lot of confusion, and I guess the confusion is really about that there was a strong commitment for sustainability, and there was a strong commitment once it was made for the kind of a green transition and the kind of the tackling environmental issues, tackling climate change issues, tackling business and human rights related issues. But I guess it's also now that there has been parliament elections in between, the report is out, and of course, what has happened outside of EU has reflected quite a lot what is also happening here. So kind of a general turmoil, economically, geopolitically, all these things have brought us here today. And Omnibus, there are a few key takeaways, not going into details on that as was discussed, but basically the scope has been diminished. It should save 80% actually of the companies from applying that. Also the kind of the implementation of that should only take place a bit later than had been expected. Well, of course, a lot of confusion. Many companies already have invested a huge amount of time and money. Wave 2 companies, Wave 3 companies already now, they are doing the work now. We don't know what will happen with omnibus regulation once again. I mean, it will go through the same regulatory process as anything else, even though the omnibus regulation as such was done in quite a quick turn. I mean, the process forward will take time. So I don't know how sustainable that process really is. That in the middle of the process, there will be a lot of new regulation, and everybody's asking that. Okay, are we asked to be compliant, or are we not going to be asked to be compliant? And same with CSDDD. It's all about basically watering down once again the scope, who it will apply to, the timeline. Of course, with that, it's perhaps not so heavy as it's 1 year further. So the basically the rule will enter into force 2028. If it would become effective as proposed. Some of the liability clauses will be taken out and basically will be left to national member states to decide on, and so on. It's all about, as said, cost savings, trying to be competitive, but at the same time, right now it feels that, of course, the companies are really much question marks. What will happen? What will be the timeline? Is everything we have taken now will put on the trash? Can it be used? Did we do correct things? Did we take sideways? What is this? And we don't know how this will really end and when it will end. So currently, understandably, very much confusion. And of course, also from the smaller companies' point of view, previously they were included in the supply chain. Now the CSDDD is only to be limited if it passes in a proposed form to the very first stage of a supply chain, tier 1 supply chains, unless there are some heightened risks, which I don't know how you can then define what is that. But cost savings of talking about 6 billion or something like that. I don't know how that has been calculated. Don't ask me that. I think the intentions are good. Understanding very well that there might be some overregulatory also, but the way this has been handled, I cannot really praise the way it has been handled and caused a kind of a lot of confusion. But perhaps it's good that I stop here with this topic and just a few words about DIA. Of course, that's also something which we have lately seen very much in the topics, but it has not been just a recent development. I mean, there have been setbacks in DIA already for quite some time on the gender movement related topics, and not only in the US, but it's a kind of a peak what we have lately seen, and it's interesting now to see that how the companies will how they will need to answer to the demands, and how they want to answer to the demands, as we have big companies who have just needed to pull away, at least publicly, from supporting certain DIA-related matters, but then there are also big companies who are saying that we don't care, we will still follow our own principles, and this is an important matter for us. So, but DIA would require a separate session of itself, I believe. So I'll leave it here now.
Thank you, Salla. I think that's just what comes to my mind when I'm listening to your reflections here about what's happened during the last year. It's, a year ago, I used to have this presentation from soft law to hard law, where we saw all of these voluntary commitments, signing up to the UN Global Compact, saying that we respect the ILO principles. All of these suddenly became hard law. And now I think we go back to soft law, at least for a while. To confusion, yes, but definitely to soft law. So I think in principle, nothing has changed for companies that said that we respect human rights. We want to have transparent, fair business practices. So in a way, I think we are shaken because the hard law aspect is now what's confusing, but the soft law piece was there, it's still there. But Pontus, I'll ask you the $1 million question, How did we end up here? Any reflections from your side?
Yes, I will now give you the conclusive answer to that. No, I mean, this is the $1 million question, and the boring answer is maybe there is not one answer. There are several answers, and there are several reasons, depending on where we are in the world, and maybe also which different sectors we are talking about and what kind of legislations and so forth. To start with, I think that one thought from me is that sustainability and also compliance trends are a bit cyclic. If you have had a focus on one area for a while, then you tend to get the reaction against it. And we have had a huge focus on DEI questions in the United States for a long time. And also in Europe, we have had a big focus on sustainability and environmental questions. So from that point of view, I'm not that surprised, actually, that we get this reaction. well, nothing surprised me now when it comes to what comes from the White House, etc. But that's another question. So, and I also think that the background and the reason for this development is different when it comes to DEI and when it comes to omnibus in Europe, because DEI is, according to me at least, a very political question. It is a question that is used more or less like a weapon in the sort of cultural war that we can see now in the United States, in the very polarized society that we see in US at the moment. And I think one of the background to this is the court case from the Supreme Court in 2023, where the court said that anti-discriminatory campaigns and programs is in itself unfair. They are discrimination of certain groups in society. And the group they pointed out was the sort of groups that has dominated the labor market for the last 100 years, white American men, right? So, and that then developed to a movement picked up by Mr. Trump and used as, because he of course understood that this is something that attracts my supporters. And this has then developed and now become some kind of scapegoat to almost anything that goes bad in the United States, including the safety problems in Boeing machines and also the collapse of the bridge in Baltimore, which is of course totally unfounded, but that's the reason. That's how they talk about it. And as we heard, Omnibus has a bit different background with Draghi's report pointing out sort of the regulatory barriers as one of the big reasons for the fact that Europe is now lagging behind the US when it comes to economic development. And as was said, companies react differently to this. When it comes to DEI, of course, a lot of companies has abolished their programs for different reasons, cost cutting and resources. Some continue at the same track as before because they think it's good for business. And the same goes for the omnibus. I think especially big companies, as you mentioned, we have prepared for this for years. And we now see, yes, simplification is good. However, this also raises a lot of uncertainty on what will be the end result. And it's also a risk that this is watered down.
We lost the other mic. Okay. We have an audio issue. Can you drop the mic altogether? Okay. And you just need to speak up louder. Okay, let's see. Okay. Oh, yeah. But when listening to this, it's kind of interesting to think that we're, like Anna said, that kind of first we were thinking we're moving from soft law to hard law, and now we are like thinking that, okay, where is the law going? And I guess companies are asking themselves that why are we doing this? Because many obviously we're doing at the end of the day everything because we have to. And now if we don't have to, what should we do? And if companies don't have to, are they able to do what is needed in order to, save the world? So, Salla, what do you think about the kind of role of legislation? Do we need it? Do we have overregulation? What is that? What should we think?
Well, I'm a lawyer. I think, of course, regulation is needed. And even though I'm perhaps not the lawyer who is always thinking that regulation is really, really needed, and even though I come from Finland, which is sometimes claimed to be rules of Finland, Santa Suomi, having regulated basically everything from A to B and C and forward. And so having a little bit similar type of discussions internally with what we are now facing in the EU overall. But yes, I do think that regulation is necessary in the field of sustainability. As we know, I am still in the opinion that the things didn't really move forward as quickly as they should have. We are facing enormous crisis, what comes to climate, what comes to environment, what comes to, so many environmental issues, climate change, but also human rights. And I really think that the way forward is decent regulation. Nothing extraordinary or anything like that. But it's also about level playing field in order to be fair for everybody. Talking about markets, talking about companies, talking about, of course, individuals as such. What comes to sustainability field is, of course, always important things like greenwashing, whitewashing, pinkwashing, whatever type of a washing type of a matters. And I think that certain regulation is also necessary in that scene as such. So I am in for the regulation, but then it's of course a question that whether EU went a little bit too far or to certain details which really have been left out. But overall, I think it's a name of the kind of the public interests and protecting ourselves from ourselves. It's needed.
That's curious to hear your view here, Pontus, because you work for a company, a forestry company. That's, I mean, you have had issues both with, well, environment is obvious,
all kind of issues.
and human rights and so on, and have worked based on voluntary principles for quite a long time, and now you've moved into a role where you're really working with the legal issues. So would be very curious to hear your view on, is regulation needed to make Stora Enso into a responsible company on a broader front, or would you be able to cope without regulation and do it anyhow? What's your view?
I think I have always, in my compliance role, I have always preached that regulations are needed, but the most important thing is actually the values the company stands for. Because that is I mean, there is no doubt that compliance and sustainability is a business enabler.
I'm sorry, can I stop you for a second? We have an audio issue and we're trying to fix it.
Okay.
Mia will turn off the microphone from the room. Yeah. And I'll bring you a laptop and we'll hope that the audio will get better.
Okay.
Cyber attack. Somebody doesn't want us to have this conversation, right?
Okay.
So can we continue? Yes.
Please do.
Yes. So we apologize to all of you online. We've understood we have a bit of an audio issue. We said it's a site. Somebody doesn't want us to have this discussion right now, but we're now talking about, yes, whether Stora Enso, whether you need regulation and your view on that. Pontus.
No, in my role as a compliance officer, I always preach that compliance and sustainability sort of is not only a risk mitigator, it's also a business enabler. I mean, it's no doubt that we can create a lot of value with having a good approach when it comes to these kind of questions. When it comes to, for example, attracting customers, of course, when it comes to attracting investors, and not least when it comes to attracting new talent, so to say. And if you take the DEI development in the United States, for example, I mean, in the short run, it's no doubt that companies or many companies will abolish their DEI programs because of what we've heard here. But in the end, I think that business realities will actually decide what company thinks is important. And if you take DI as an example, I mean, we need to create a working place that is open, that is welcoming, and that is inclusive for everyone. Otherwise, we will sort of lose out 50% of people, women, and also a lot of talents in different minority groups and so forth. So business realities will sort of be the decisive question on how companies move. And with that argumentation, we don't need any regulation at all, right?
Exactly.
But
Okay.
We need to speak louder.
Should we? Okay. We should be speak up.
Yes. Now I think we try like this.
Let's try to be loud.
Let's try to be loud. And just as I said, if you take that approach, then you don't need any regulation at all, right? But as you said here, not all companies reason that way. I mean, there are always companies that don't really care about what stakeholders think, and maybe they don't have this maybe a bit more advanced thinking about these questions, and they will try to cut corners and
do different kind of irregularities. So I'm of the view, yes, that we need regulation. But as you also said, we need good regulation. And maybe what we have seen in the last decade, especially from the EU, is maybe that, the avalanche of new legislative initiatives create some kind of sort of, as we say in compliance fatigue, right? Or legislation fatigue among companies, which is problematic because maybe the legislation is not always thought through in the way we would wish. It doesn't answer all the questions. It creates a lot of administrative burden and uncertainties. So yes, regulations are needed, but good regulations.
And that's what we're going to see then. What's going to come up? Yeah.
Yeah. So now we are talking here among the ethics and compliance professionals, but I'd like to hear a bit on how is the discussion in the boardrooms. So I know all of you have their regular visits. So Anna, would you like to share some thoughts about kind of over the year, how has the atmosphere and the discussion been evolving in the boardrooms?
Well, I think that's also a subject to full discussion as well. But I think in general, if I start there, ethics and compliance and sustainability has always been a little bit difficult to discuss in the boardrooms, I think, because boards, they want precise data, they want measurements, they want to see kind of concrete progress. And it's sometimes hard. And I think we struggle as a community and profession to provide like good data that is not misleading, right? Because I think all of these topics, it's as soon as you distill it down to a few KPIs in the boardroom, they're just looking at that and the green dot or yellow dot. And if it's green, they don't really care. So in order to have a discussion in the boardroom, you need to have a KPI with a red dot, and then you facilitate the discussion. And I think that's the first thing, which is a bit challenging, to make sure we don't simplify the reality in terms of what we are working with. So I think that's the first thing. And then the second thing, when CSRD came with a lot of reporting points, I think many boards were like, oh, finally we have something that we can grasp. And they started to ask about, well, how many reporting points do we have? And it became sort of now I'm of course simplifying a bit, but it became sort of a mean in itself to say, okay, how can we reduce the reporting points? And companies started to do benchmarking. And I had board members saying, okay, but in this company, we have 352 reporting points. And this company, like, why do we have more? Why do we have less? And for me, that is totally irrelevant. And in a way, it's good now that we hopefully get away from that discussion. If you, with your boards, discuss CSRD reporting points, tell your board that they're totally off track. That is not a board topic. Have you ever heard a board of directors discuss how many IFRS reporting points they have? Like never, right? Never. They just discuss the outcomes, the long-term strategy, what kind of company we want to be, how do we deliver upon that? So I think in the boardrooms, first we had a bit of ambiguity, like the challenge that we're not misleading our boards with just showing a lot of good progress, but not really talking about the real issues. Then we started talking a lot about reporting points and thinking that now finally we can distill this complex reality into reporting points. And now I think we're in a stage where we need to start to talk about the real issues and confront our boards with the fact that maybe there will not be perfect regulation, Pontus. Regulation is never perfect, right? So I think that's what we also need to say to our boards, that we need to decide what kind of company do we want to be. The decisions and investments that we do today, the products that we put on the market today, how will we look upon that in 10 years' time? So I work for a medtech company. If we now put products on the market that are producing a lot of electricity, a lot of water, we use a lot of gas that's has detrimental CO2 effects. So are we now putting on products on the market that in 10 years' time people will ask, like, were you crazy? Like, you cannot have a product on the market that's just using a lot of water. So we need to think about this strategically. And all of us know about ethics, business ethics, the scandals that companies end up in, it's decisions that were made 5, 10, 15 years ago. So I think now it's the time to seize the opportunity to go back to the kind of real core in our boardrooms and talk about our values and what kind of companies we want to be, and sort of get away from talking about regulation and reporting points. So
great answer. But before we take the audience questions, just wanted to ask from Pontus and Salla if you have any reflections for this board perspective.
I think the overall and big question is, how do we sort of create and keep a sort of a sustainable ethics and compliance program? And how do we sort of keep the company on the right track now in time of sort of political turbulence? And as you said, I mean, I don't think that the value of sort of the strong company culture can be overestimated. I mean, it's very easy to write the code or write the business practice policy and keep it in the bookshelf. But creating the strong company culture, that's really how we sort of keep the company on the right track in times like this. And I also think that the sort of roles of ethics and compliance in companies will be even more important now for different reasons. I mean, if you see the geopolitical situation today in the world, it makes people afraid, right? It makes people uncertain what will happen with the world, what will happen with our company, what will happen with my employment, so to say. And that creates people that might be afraid. And we all know what happened with afraid people, right? They might act irrationally. And I think also the role of ethics and compliance will also increase in relation to management, because they will more than ever need the sort of guidance and risk orientation that we can give them. Because now there is no doubt that fundamental values of management will also change now when they hear what's happening in the world, right? And then we need to be there and guide them and point out the risks and also opportunities with having a strong company culture. That's some thoughts from me.
Well, if I add, I think that I have seen various types of approaches to this matter, and I guess it comes really back to very various types of companies and boards. I mean, there are still boards who think that we have been doing this in a past 30 years like this. There is some sort of a trend or fuss about sustainability, but it will go away and then we can get back to our own track. There are still people who think that sustainability is not any kind of an issue for their company, which is of course a bit of a scary. I'm thinking that sustainability is of course for every company, as similarly as I always think that technology is something that every company should be thinking about. Every company is nowadays a technology company, similarly to would need to think that they are operating in the field of sustainability, even if they would not be in the field of for example, some environmental fields or stuff like that. But I mean, taking that every company have employees and have stakeholders and so on. But then many companies also, of course, see that as some sort of an advantage, and they really want to push forward. And then it comes back to the question that should they just follow the rules, kind of a tick the box from the compliance side, or take some additional steps. And I cannot be without using this opportunity. We have been, DLA Piper has been operating in collaboration with Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership, and we have had a project regarding sustainability and the board work. And they just issued a second part of the report. It's really interesting read. I can recommend it to be read by everybody. It's good use for not only for the board members, but also people at the management team and so on. It's based on the interviews and academic research as such. But I guess the key takeaway from that is that those companies which have taken the sustainability issues into their strategy are those who will win the game in a way. As then it's really needed to be taken into account everything what is done. Of course, the level can be still chosen and so on, but then it's not really left behind.
I think it's worth of taking a look at, and I think it's a good thing that in a way thinking what is really the board's role. It is really about the strategy, setting up the strategy, and everything similar to values comes after that.
Thanks for sharing. We will definitely add the link to the report.
Please.
For thank you letter. But did we have a question from the audience?
Yes, we did. Salla almost answered this already, but the question is that what role does leadership play in ensuring compliance while maintaining ethical business practices amid shifting regulatory and social landscapes?
Feel free.
Easy questions.
You kick in a door here, but I mean, I think leadership is fundamental for creating the company culture. If we don't have a management that is a forerunner and act what it says, so to say, then it doesn't really matter what you do as a compliance function. It's totally irrelevant if I try to preach something and the CEO does something else. So fundamental.
And I fully agree with Pontus that yes, it's fundamental, because otherwise you get this value dissonance where you say, okay, yeah, we should do business with integrity, but then everybody sees that this is not integrity, right? But I also would like to cite Michaela, who we have here in the audience, who quite often say that we overestimate the role of management. And I feel provoked because I'm sitting in an executive management team, and Michaela says, well, you're 10 people, you're not that important, actually. and I've reflected a lot upon that, because of course, I do think we play a role. We set the tone, we set the targets, we provide, space, but we are 12,000 employees, and it is really about empowering everybody and making sure everybody takes their responsibility as well, and not only look at the top and say, well, it's a top management responsibility and I don't have any responsibility. So, but that's of course the role of, I think ethics and compliance can play a critical role there in empowering everybody to feel responsible and taking their responsibility. Because if you get that movement in an organization, you also create kind of a pressure from below, in a way, that it becomes visible that you have this value dissonance between what is said and what is done. So I really, started to love what Michaela is saying, and it's because it's so right that we shouldn't overestimate the role of management. Yes, it's super important, but the role of ethics and compliance should be to empower everybody else, to make sure everybody is able to make the responsible decisions. So yeah, I think there is
yes, if I may reformulate what but I don't specifically mean the top management of the company. I think that all leaders in a company, we can be leaders on all levels. And sometimes we talk about the tone of the top, but I think the tone of the middle is maybe even more important, because that's the people you meet every day. And you can be a leader in a company without having formal leadership as well, so to say. So I agree with you.
Yeah. Yes, and I would just add that it's not only about the leaders, but about the impact that they have on everyone in the organization. Right. But hey, do we have any questions in the room? Yes. Do we need a mic, or should we just shout out? Okay, shout out, please.
So, thank you. My name is Suvi Hirvonen. Thank you so much, Salla, and all the panelists for this very great event and for your insights. I would like to ask, I like very much what you said, that, and I believe in it, that this sustainability is a strategic competitive advantage, and those companies who do it, whether regulated or not, will in the long run be the winners. So how do you see this happening now? So is this like sustainability is, I think it's an investment, like any investment is. So it takes some time before it starts to produce some monies. But how long do you see? Because right now we don't know what's going on, because the world is upside down. But still, if you may tell something that you think that how long would we expect something to happen? And also one thing that you said about this, that if companies don't do this, and if they don't take on all the employees, they will lose the best ones. So in the end of the day, they will lose. And then the third thing maybe is that I've often seen a kind of comparison or the same analogy between sustainability and technology, like Salla said. So if we think about the AI revolution, it is starting from the ground and going up. So employees use more AI than their leaders, and then leaders are forced to make policy for it. So maybe with sustainability, so how do you see the role of employees a little bit? You touched it, and also the markets. Because what about consumers? What about shareholders? So do you believe that they will make the revolution? Because if they don't want to buy bad stuff, they don't. If they don't want to buy bad shares, they don't. Do you see any impact on that, or how do you feel about this?
Great question. Let's just repeat it for the sake of those who are online. So first question was really about the timing, like when will we see sustainability really be integrated in strategy? And the second one was more on making sure companies are attractive employers, right? That employees see this is a company that I want to work for and it resonates with my values. And the third one was more about the external pressures on companies and leaders, either from bottom up within the organization, or then from consumers and stakeholders. Yes,
investors.
And investors. Yeah. I can just quickly say on the first one, when will we see sustainability be integrated into strategies? I think those companies that are successful today have integrated sustainability into their strategies. It's a must. I don't think you can survive long-term, generating shareholder returns if you're not thinking about sustainability today. So it has to be here and now. For me, it's not about when, it's about how companies are doing that. And it's all about education as well. We need to educate our organizations, and that's maybe tying up to your bottom-up perspective as well, and empower employees to think broadly, because that is all, if we think what sustainability is about, it's thinking about broader consequences on the environment and society from what you're doing as a business. And we need to educate our R&D teams, our sales teams, our marketing teams to think in a broader perspective and to factor in these kind of external requirements into product development, go-to-market strategies, and so on. So I think that's really crucial. And I think that's happening in many, many organizations. That I'm almost every day impressed with what I hear in my organization, just anecdotal things that are just happening on the ground where my colleagues, like in an R&D team, for example, have taken great initiatives. As you were saying, like with AI, they use a lot of AI, but they're also thinking very creatively about environmental challenges, for example, and ethical dilemmas as well when it comes to certain issues. So I think it's all about empowerment, educating, and making sure employees, everybody is learning how to factor in this into the decision-making processes in the organization. And if you shut that down, I'll come to your second question. I think employees who care, and most employees, like younger generation, they do care, I would argue. I think if they work for a company where they feel they're shut down and it's all about, no, this is costing too much, we need to maximize results here and now, they will leave. So yeah. I'll stop there.
I think you answered all the questions. Nothing to add.
Nothing to add. But yes, I think there is one topic that the compliance profession is also looking to hear a bit today, which is the FCPA. So last month, the President Trump issued an executive order pausing all the FCPA investigations and enforcement actions for 180 days. And we have here Richard Bystrom in the audience, who happens to be quite familiar with this topic. So Richard, would you like to share a bit on your thoughts on these recent developments?
Do you mind coming here? Yeah, so.
I can move.
Okay.
We'll give you a seat here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Nina. It's great to be back here in Helsinki.
Great to have you here.
And I'm happy to share some of the developments with respect to our anti-bribery world, but please don't blame the messenger here, okay? So as Nina shared, a few things happened, just to go through the steps. The Attorney General issued a memo on February 5th called the Total Elimination of Transnational Criminal Organizations and Cartels, of which anti-bribery enforcement and FCPA enforcement was a part of that memo, and to reprioritize anti-bribery enforcement around criminal organizations. So that was the first step. And then about, I think, 5 days later, President Trump issued the executive order, which gave the Attorney General 180 days to review the FCPA with the expectations that new guidelines would be issued. So as far as the FCPA is concerned, everything has changed and nothing has changed. Nothing has changed, Anna, in terms of it is still a hard law.
Good
right?
to hear.
That has not
Still there.
changed. What has changed is, and what remains to be seen, is how it is going to be enforced. And I think we can expect some changes there. There were some interesting statements from the president with respect to the FCPA putting U.S. companies at a disadvantage with respect to common business practices overseas. I mean, that's a statement that can be subject to a lot of different interpretations. So we'll see what the Attorney General has to say about that. But Anna, as you shared in starting this panel, stay the course, right? Because if you look at some of the facts here, the SEC still has responsibility for books and records enforcement. They are not a subset of the Department of Justice, so the SEC is still involved. Just recently, the government went to court because the judge asked in a case of two executives from a company named Cognizant, and the judge said to the prosecutors, "Are you still going to continue the case?" And the prosecutor said yes. So there are cases that are ongoing. The whistleblowing hotline is still open. So I don't think from a regulatory perspective, it's a good time to take a turn. And I think this panel, really, you could have substituted anti-bribery for sustainability. I think this is a great time. And there have been some really interesting discussions in the US with clients and webinars. This is a great time to lean on values, right? And if FCPA is part of your anti-bribery training, maybe you can think about taking that out, because it should be about anti-bribery, not geared to a specific law, right? And to really double down on the principles part of why you don't pay bribes. And it's not necessarily linked to a regulation. I would also share that my own FCPA case took 10 years. So it started in the Bush administration, and it finished in the Obama administration. And one of the prosecutors was a colleague of Salas, so John Hooray, who's back with DLA Piper now. So there's a 5-year statute of limitations. You don't want to put people in harm's way, because today's guidance doesn't necessarily mean that the next administration will take the same view. So that's a little bit of the sort of the hard side and the soft side, that the risks haven't changed, like you were talking about in sustainability. Maybe the regulations are shifting, but does that mean that you need to shift with them?
I think a great analysis. And also what comes to my mind is that we all know we owe a lot to the FCPA, right? Because since the late 1970s, I mean, that was the only law for decades, basically, and has really forced other authorities, such as the UK authorities, French authorities, Brazilian authorities, who have upped up their local laws and enforcement. And I'm wondering, will we now actually see, for example, Europe stepping up like even more in this regard? Maybe it's time, maybe it's, just only relying on the FCPA and FCPA enforcement in this field. It's not sustainable, and we see that now. So I do hope other regulators are stepping up. We have very interesting developments within the EU with the anti-corruption directive, which may be the topic for our next discussion after the summer. And just coincidentally, I think it was a day after Trump issued the executive order on pausing the FCPA enforcement, China, the Chinese authorities came out with a statement just saying that they are putting even more efforts into anti-corruption enforcement. Those of us with operations in China, we know that already for 2 years, they've had this very rigorous anti-corruption campaign, and they said, we're going to continue and we're going to put even more efforts, and anti-corruption enforcement is very important for China. Coincidence, one day after Trump's statement, I don't know, but I think maybe it's time for other authorities to step up here in this field. I don't know, any quick reflections on this?
Well, I think the consensus in the United States is it's easy for the Serious Fraud Office to say, okay, we're going to step up enforcement. There's a vacuum and anti-bribery enforcement with the US. But the amount of resources that the US brought to these global investigations was considerable. So saying that you're going to step up means dedicating significantly more resources to anti-bribery enforcement. So we'll see what happens there. And I think the only other thing I would add as former commercial Richard is we are in a time of economic volatility, political uncertainty, and we're getting mixed signals and mixed messages from the regulators. And this is not a good time to let people to try to figure this out on their own, which I think goes back to what Pontus was talking about. This is an important time to double down on values. So people don't say, well, my company's saying one thing, but the regulators are saying another. Is this really so important? It's never been more important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Do we have any questions from the line and audience before we change seats with Richard and Pontus
I'm
again?
going to see Pontus' seat.
But we have some questions.
Yes, we have a practical question asking how should you approach external communications and marketing on sustainability and day topics given the potential shift from liberal to more conservative consumer values and the opposition to these topics?
So we have a question here on managing the external communication in terms of moving from more liberal to conservative values. I think I'll just repeat a little bit what Richard was saying, that this is my personal view is that as a company, why do you need to change? Like, didn't you have your values, and why do you need to change your values now? If we think about diversity, I mean, valuing diverse talent, different backgrounds, different experience, making sure we have a representative workforce, why should that change? So I'm a bit questioning the whole question. Why do you need to change your communication here? One thing, of course, if you think specifically about the US and the diversity topic, what's there really the core? It's talking about what Pontus was saying, the illegal diversity practices. But if you practice fair recruitment processes, having good fair representation, it wasn't illegal. It's not illegal now. So my view is that you don't really have to change, but happy to hear other views.
I don't, I mean, I fully agree with you, fully on board with you. I really think that it's actually the only correct way of thinking. Otherwise, it would be a bit of an artificial, in a way. So, yeah, just a short comment.
Do we have some more questions? Yes, maybe a short one. Oh, two questions. Yes, please go ahead.
I have a
Yeah.
question for Richard. So thank you so much for shedding light on what's going on in US behind the curtains, because what we see is on TV right now. So that's one story. But what are the others thinking? Democrats, part of the Republicans, the large corporations, or is it too early to say? Are they just in shock?
Can I answer from here?
They hear online.
Yes, you need to go.
Yeah. So yeah.
Laptop comes to you.
Okay. So thank you for the question. I think, again, given the executive order that is giving the Attorney General 180 days to re-examine enforcement priorities and to issue new guidelines, that I think everyone is just taking a wait and see attitude toward this. The president was not in any way saying this law should be abolished. I think he is trying to better align FCPA enforcement with national security goals, with what might be political goals. So that's also a potential risk that's being talked about, which is possible weaponization of the FCPA, that it is used in a way that might punish foreign companies in terms of the competitive landscape. So that has not been such a risk. In fact, the OECD said that the FCPA has not been weaponized for economic reasons, but there is discussion that that could be a potential risk depending on what the Attorney General has to say. So I think right now everyone's giving the Attorney General the time and to see what happens, because we have 30 years of really solid enforcement. And I think that the hope is that that continues and that the US still does lead in terms of the resources and the investigations with respect to anti-bribery enforcement. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for the
Pleasure.
question. And
Very
being
good
conscious of the time, I know we have more questions here in the room, but we'll promise to answer those right after the session while we have more coffee. But I think maybe to summarize this conversation, I would like to go back to the ethics and compliance profession. So what should we take out of this conversation? How should we as a profession evolve, and what kind of tips or guidelines or wise words would you give as a final words?
No, as I said, I think that in these times of political turbulence, the importance of ethics and compliance will increase on different levels. And I also think that we as compliance professionals need to be prepared to be more questioned by the management, because this, what we see now is the tendency, right, to sort of abolish DEI programs, to have a lower sort of focus on compliance and sustainability. So that means that we need to sharpen our arguments, right? And we need also to be sort of very focused on tendencies in the companies in this direction, so we can be there, guide, and make sure that we stay on track.
Well, I don't know whether if I really answer to your question as such, but I think that something I have been thinking quite a lot lately is that exactly a year ago when we were here, we were actually discussing that it seemed to be then the kind of the sentiment as because the regulation process had already then taken so long time what comes to CSDDD, that actually the business was ready to move forward and the politicians were more on a kind of a breaking the process. And it's a question that what happened in between, because now it might be the way around. And of course, I mean, the small business were as confused as they might be at the moment, or also a year ago. But at least the larger businesses, they were kind of already understood that, you know, this is the way forward. There will be a heavy regulation. We will need to tackle this, and we will need to seek those advantages instead of kind of only seeing the compliance box. So I think this kind of tells a lot about the current sentiment and stage, and not perhaps only on the field of sustainability, but overall. So this is kind of my take on this. And as noted, I do not have real answers, but I hope that at least we have had we have had an opportunity to give some coffee, tea, and sympathy, and in accordance with the kind of the sustainability alliance here. So yeah, that's my kind of a take on this.
So great, super interesting. You know, we could have kept going on.
Exactly.
I think my really short kind of giveaway and takeaway personally is that we should have been we should already have had the difficult discussions. Now even more critical that we, as Pontus said, we feel comfortable raising the difficult questions, having the difficult discussions, and just normalizing that. I think that's my takeaway.
Thank you, everyone. Richard, Pontus, Salla, and Anna. So I think we are running out of time, but we will continue in the next Ethics Talk. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.